Hold on a second, wait right there. Am I reading this correctly? But that being said, there are plenty of question marks to be had, and it could be down to many other factors. Fatigued or not, this story matters. As Red Bull team principal Laurent Mekies has put it, we are watching history in the making, and he wants to see Max at the heart of the Red Bull project for as long as possible. And even if Max Verstappen fails to win the world title this year, the comeback that he's had so far has gotten plenty of F1 fans hooked and fascinated in what happens, because you do sense that the animosity toward Max Verstappen has very much reduced since the beginning of this year, what we saw at the F1 75 Live exhibition, where Red Bull basically just said, okay Max, just get on stage and then get out stage right. He didn't say a word. That's how bad it got. But as a result, it means that other matters that might have been given more priority under previous tenureships might have now been pushed to the background a little bit. Red Bull might not be stopping their upgrade path, and McLaren have said that they are not going to be resuming production on 39. And it was only just a couple of days ago when we were all going like, oh, is this going to be it? Is the Mexico City Grand Prix going to be the place where all the fates of Hadjar, Lawson and Tsunoda are decided? And granted, this did come from the likes of Dr. Marko, who changes tack as quickly as an error-free McLaren pit stop, but this time around it seems to be hitting differently. And you also sense that maybe Dr. Marko doesn't have quite as much influence on the decision that he might have had in previous time, even though he did in theory win the battle against Christian Horner for power of the F1 team. Because historically, post-race meetings regarding lineups and what have you and the future of the team have really mattered, and the decision has usually been quite swift, but I think this time around, it's not so much. Now, okay, I might be having to sip from the cup of copium a little bit here, but I don't have to really take a big chug or anything like that. But it has been my supposition for a while now that all the current Red Bull F1 drivers will remain where they are for 2026, it now looking a little more likely than it was even as recently as Monza, as said by Helmut Marko's most recent assessment of the matter, which to be fair did get buried underneath all of the other stuff that happened around the United States Grand Prix. Max winning quite comfortably, yet again, equaling Lando Norris's win tally, the two McLarens colliding in the sprint, and then Norris closing in on Piastri. Heck, even the aftermath of Franco Colapinto ignoring team orders for P17, again, such a ridiculous situation, got more attention than what was going on with the fate of Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson, and the fact that Isaac Hadjar had a bit of a stinker of a weekend. That being said, there are still elements that could mean that at least one driver's future might be at risk, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a complete and utter overhaul. Here are Helmut Marko's words for your consideration from Sky Deutschland via Planet F1. Ahem. He had a very good start in Austin and was competitive when he had a clear run. That's Yuki Tsunoda, by the way. So there is an upward trend there as well. He's stabilising, and that's very important in the World Championship fight. The driver decision is not our priority at the moment. In general, this is planned, but let's see to what extent we can decide then. Okay, that sounds clear enough. It doesn't mean that, Yuki is an absolute wunderkind, forget the meeting, hurrah, let's make the decision now. No, they're not saying that. The meeting is still very much on. It's just not going to be taking place after the Mexico City Grand Prix, unless, of course, Yuki Tsunoda causes a multi-car pile-up, which compromises Verstappen. I'm really hoping this video ages anything other than milk. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't Marko saying the decision has become so insignificant that it can wait. In fact, it could be the opposite. It could have become a heck of a lot more complex, with many other priorities having to be accounted for, as well as upticks from every single driver that isn't Verstappen. Although you could easily say that Verstappen has also had an uptick in performance, but every single one of them has had something to cheer about. Yuki Tsunoda has had a really good tick, especially with Baku, let's not forget that. Him really aggrieving Lando Norris to the point where he was grumbling about the Japanese driver in the post-race conference. Then there's Liam Lawson after the front suspension tweak since Austria. He's been on a tear. He's not that far behind Hadjar in the points. And Hadjar himself has been an absolute surprise this year. People not really thinking much of him at the beginning of the year, but now many fans, especially Tsunoda fans, are clinging onto him for dear life saying, he's their baby, dang it, don't you dare get rid of him! Oh, no, don't worry, they're not getting rid of him. Marko said very much he is going to be within the Red Bull fold next year, it's just a question of which team. So yeah, out of all three of them, Hadjar is looking the more secure of them, and especially that Zandvoort podium would have helped him tremendously. And also, you've just got to throw in the spanner of speculation a little bit, at least just a teensy tiny bit. But I do think that even though Marko is now a bigger figure within Red Bull Racing, he might not have unchecked authority anymore, because in the aftermath of the Horner allegations and the passing of Dietrich Mateschitz, Red Bull head office in Salzburg has taken a very big interest in what goes on with their team. Corporate Austria has pulled more oversight in recent times. This could mean that they might chime in more in terms of driver debates, especially where Ford and future sponsorship alignments are concerned. And if that's true, Tsunoda's popularity and more sponsor-friendly profile, he's doing a lot of double duty on social media, could become a major corporate asset. But more on that later. There are still quite a few more races left after the Mexico City Grand Prix, which could easily define where both teams wind up in the constructors. There is a real chance that Red Bull could get a little bit more prize money and finish runner-up in the constructors' position, and if it means that the driver decision is delayed until maybe after the young driver test in around Abu Dhabi, it means that whatever outcome has been made, it means it's been made with all of the figures laid out on the table. And Racing Bulls themselves, they are in a position to potentially get 6th place in the Constructors' Championship. And for the Faenza-based team that was once Minardi, 6th place in the Constructors is very, very good. Not to mention, it'll be a nice little goodbye present to Honda if Red Bull Racing are able to finish in the runner-up spot and have the second team within the top 6. So that will be a really good show before they then go over to Aston Martin and decide what goes on from there. As well as in the midst of Alonso saying that the team currently, in his eyes, is the 9th fastest team. So he's being a little bit more subtle with his digs, not saying it over the radio as much. But yeah, I think Aston are looking forward to Honda, crossing the threshold in a couple of months' time. And also, I think Ford will be very happy about what's been going on over here. I got invited to the Red Bull factory recently with channel partner Castor, affiliate link below by the way, and you could see a Mustang parked outside the team's reception door. Apparently, that is Lauren Mecky's company car, Pride of Place. And I will be making a video of that in the coming days. I hope to have it out next week, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get it as soon as it drops. But going back to the quote from Marko, it does seem like a nice little nudge of positivity, rather than a shove over the line to say that, oh, Yuki's done enough to guarantee a seat next year. It's certainly something that Yuki will appreciate. You can also sense that he was relatively calm throughout that weekend, even with his fracas with Behrman. Well, I mean, it was more like a one-sided fracas. Yuki just didn't really seem to care. It's saying that Tsunoda is finally and tangibly matching the traits that Red Bull expected from him, given the machinery they have to work with right now, before they can have a bigger reset with the RB22. Then it might mean, potentially, that Yuki will be firing on all cylinders, so will Liam, so will Isaac, we already know Max will be. It means they'll all be gunning for real big points and to make sure that their respective teams realise their full potential in the constructors. Yes, I know it'll mean that ATR time for Red Bull will be reduced, but I don't think they will say no to a $20 million increase in prize money. And yes, I know that many people have been saying, well, Yuki still got frustrated with Liam and all that stuff. Well, understandably, he is very much fighting for his life, and Lawson is a potential threat. But in the context of the things that we've seen before in the history of Tsunoda, this is a very much storm in the teacup situation. He got annoyed, but it wasn't like full-blown expletives and absolute, going, whoa, Yuki, calm down, mate. No, none of that. And to bring the whole Verstappen-Russell situation in Spain, I don't think we saw anything in terms of anger that could match Max's anger back then. So, Oliver, I get you're frustrated that you missed out on more points for your team at their home race, and that you're also possibly deflecting from your perilous position in regards to a race ban, but really? Him playing the think of the children card? Nah, mate, that ain't it. Kimi Antonelli had more justification in pulling that particular card than you, because he actually saw the end of any hopes of a couple of points. But in any case, what this means right now is that Yuki Tsunoda has now moved from a situation where he looked like a poor little victim who had adopted and inherited a poison chalice to now a more credible incumbent, and the team that he is at right now wants that little bit more data to be absolutely sure that whatever decision they make will be the correct one. It could also provide Lawson more time to stake his claim to at least a seat at Racing Bulls for next year, as the yardstick for future talent, or maybe to justify him and Hadjar remaining the double act for next year. so that means that could provide that team a solid baseline going into the new regulation cycle, then any talent after that will benefit from a more reliable and tested platform with very solid and accomplished drivers. So it just means the work of Isaac and Liam could provide future Red Bull stars a really nice little leg up and a really good testbed. And given what Verstappen's doing over at the main team, it feels like what Red Bull are really seeking right now is consistency, constants. In the face of a major engine overhaul and Red Bull dipping their toes into making their own power unit for the first time, you feel like whatever's going on right now, it's a little bit more rational than it would have been under the reins of Christian Horner. Now, I'm not saying Horner suddenly lost all of his ability to manage a team or anything. It's simply down to the fact that Red Bull main office looked at what was going on at the time and decided that they didn't have enough confidence in what Horner was able to provide them. And it's becoming clearer race by race that Red Bull's decision to change the figurehead at top of the F1 team was the right decision to make. In fact, there are rumours suggesting that Christian Horner wanted to give up on the 2025 car entirely and put all of his eggs in the 2026 basket. And that probably would have not gone down well with the Verstappen camp, them not wanting to see their boy going further and further down the order if other teams were continuing development. Mercedes probably would have been pounding them into the dust with their continuation on flexi-wing technology. Ferrari might have gotten their act together, and there would have been no chance of Red Bull getting any higher than 4th place in the Constructors. Now, though, they're looking likely to potentially be runners-up. That will be very much going down well in Salzburg. And it could also mark the beginning of the DNA of Red Bull itself changing forever. That Horner built his reputation around the fastest surviving, volatility, drama, whereas Mekies is a graduate of both Ferrari and the FIA, as well as other teams before his time with the Scuderia. And all of that time has suggested that he likes to think about structure and continuity, as in traditions over at Ferrari, which we have seen over at the Scuderia can actually work against them since they are not willing to budge and think differently. In the context of Red Bull, maybe just a steady year or two could easily provide the bedrock of some Red Bull fans returning to the fold, or maybe them making completely new fans. Therefore, this provides Tsunoda more of a balanced situation to maybe string together more clean results. Marko's language implying that he could keep the seat next to Verstappen after all. But of course, if he wobbles and Austin proves to be the dying gasp, then expect Dr. Marko to change tack yet again, and then say that Isaac Hadjar might be ready to step up. But of course, there is another matter to consider which might provide Tsunoda a little more leverage, and yes, it's to do with the power unit partner. And no, I'm not talking about Honda. I'm talking about Ford. We'll get to them in a moment, but let me just make this perfectly clear to people that might not really be aware of what Tsunoda's management structure is. Honda have nothing to do with him anymore. Yes, there was supposed talks of a nice little pay packet to get Tsunoda's deal and promotion across the line under Horner's eyes, but right now, it's very much Tsunoda staying there and no decision being made right now to replace him or demote him. It's down to the fact of what Yuki's being able to do with the management, that being Mekies, and him getting along with Verstappen, because that's another thing to say as well. Max, I don't think, especially for a long time, has been deriding his teammates whatsoever. He's not saying anything bad about Yuki, he didn't say anything bad about Liam. Checo, for the most part, was a quite harmonious relationship, which did work out for him very, very well, especially with his multiple world titles. But Honda's involvement with Tsunoda? No. Just as good friends or former co-workers, because Honda's attention right now is with Aston Martin. The only way that Tsunoda may even factor is that if Honda says to Aston Martin and Pipistrel, oh, we remember working well with Yuki. He could be a good suggestion, but, we're just putting in our recommendations here, Pipistrel. You make the final call, ultimately. So that's just something I want to say. That right now, Yuki is not a Honda pay driver. It could ultimately be down to what Ford thinks of Yuki Tsunoda. Is he any worth to them? Are they happy with Yuki's feedback and overall position within the team? Do they see him as a potentially useful and marketable foil next to Max Verstappen, who in their eyes is very much their pride and joy? But something that might count against Yuki is that Japan isn't really part of Ford's market strategy. They officially left about a decade ago after claiming just 0.1% of car sales in 2015. So whilst you could argue that Liam would have been an asset since Ford is very much a big figure within Australasia, in terms of the Asian market they pulled out of Indonesia as well, Ford has really just backed away from that market. But if they decided to keep Yuki, and they knew that Yuki was going to be part of Red Bull's plan for the good couple of years, Tsunoda could be a good figurehead in kick-starting sales in the Asia region. If Ford wants to be seen as a global powerhouse providing the power unit for Red Bull powertrains, if this is an international campaign, then you've got Max Verstappen, who's known worldwide, and you've got Tsunoda being a representative in a market which Ford has very much forgotten about. So there you go. If they wanted an ambassador for the area, then they got one. So, okay, now where does Tsunoda stand in relation to the two last casualties of the Red Bull second seat curse? You know, versus Checo and versus Lawson. In regards to Sergio, his exit was very much wrapped around politics and a couple of thousand bottles of tequila. The lesson Red Bull drew from that was that the second car cannot be erratic when the constructor's title is in play. As a result, it saw them fall from first to third. That is why Marko's keywords of stabilising and world championship fight are really important to consider here. Then Lawson's demotion after just 2 rounds told every Red Bull driver underneath that the runway can be terrifyingly short. Tsunoda's recent clean weekends, let's remember Baku, are the direct antidote to what doomed Lawson. If Yuki is able to continue his upward trend, then it might mean that Red Bull Racing might be more justified in maintaining a more experienced lineup for at least next year, instead of relying on rookie surges to make up the difference. They could do really good jobs at racing bulls, Liam and Isaac, which means that when Arvid comes online with them in 2027 perhaps, or maybe other representatives, who knows, and let's see, they could really have a good shot in the arm with a good solid midfield junior team. A really good baseline if they wish to strive for world titles. Because it is really hard to go for world titles and think about wins when your team is struggling to get 8th or 9th. Because as Hadjar and Piastri and Antonelli have demonstrated, getting at least one podium in your rookie year will do you wonders. It's safe to say that the picture for all the Red Bull drivers is a lot more conventional now than it was this time last year. Political drama seems to be far less relevant now, possibly entirely irrelevant. Now of course, as I said, Lindblad is still a factor within the Red Bull group, but his future seems a little less clear-cut than it was under Horner, because I don't think you need me to tell you, in the eyes of Christian Horner, Arvid was the future of Red Bull, their post-Verstappen solution, their Kimi Antonelli, their young spark, their young British spark. The idea of having a Red Bull driver who was British being supposedly the cure after getting overwhelmingly huge negative vibes from the O2 crowd. Yes, I do think that Arvid is destined to be within Formula 1, but in comparison to where he was at the start of the F2 campaign, where he was contesting the top 3, to where he is now when he's not even in the top 5, does suggest that the decision to maybe promote him into the F1 Racing Bulls team is maybe a little bit less easy to justify. It's not out of the question, certainly not, but it's not a no-brainer anymore. And that makes me think that if Red Bull wants to bring Lindblad into prime time, they need to at least maybe give him a little bit more time behind the scenes to refine his craft, which means when he does arrive, he'll make an even bigger impact. Because so far the biggest impact that Arvid has made is the impact he made with Dunn at Monza, and Lindblad getting dragged over the coals for it, as much as Dunn did in Monaco. And I think he'll also be really pleased to see that Marko said that Alex Dunn will not be driving a Red Bull car next year. That's been giving them a little bit of breathing space, as well as Nikola Solov. If Red Bull decide they need another year before making Lindblad a full-time racer for their F1 teams, the next move could be to name him as the reserve for both teams, yet again, give him more FP1 sessions akin to Behrman, as in having 6 of them, as well as maybe partake in Japan's Super Formula Series, so as to keep him race sharp whilst he increases his simulation efforts as the team recalibrate before the new wind tunnel comes online. I really do think Super Formula might be a good situation where Arvid can really hone his craft in relative radio silence. Yes, Super Formula is gaining more international fans, but in comparison to Formula 2, which, as we saw in Monza, can easily generate a lot of scorn toward you, especially from people who don't watch F2 or F3 on the regular, then maybe this might be a place where he can garner more experience without as much attention. And also with a car that Liam Lawson himself rated really highly as being important as to why he made a big splash in Formula 1 in 2023. It being described by many as an F2 Plus car. It being just that little bit quicker, and you can easily tell that Dallara took some of the inspiration they got from that car into the current F2 car, especially with that rear wing. And this doesn't necessarily mean that Arvid will be relegated to that campaign for the entire season. It just means that he's got something to do and to focus on within the Japanese Red Bull market, and also potentially being ready for an in-season call-up if it does happen. Say if Liam completely falls off, or Isaac gets promoted, or Yuki does end up being removed, he's there ready to go in case anything happens. Because I do think Formula 2 is now relatively unnecessary for Lindblad, because he's tried it out, he's already got the super license points required, he had that before the Formula 2 season started. He's had a go there, maybe try something else to try and get a wide range of skill sets amongst different categories, because as we've seen with Verstappen, him racing in different categories has certainly done him the world of good in terms of his mindset. And with Marko focused on sustaining Verstappen's renewed championship rhythm as well as Mecky's, the question of who partners him feels less urgent. The talks will happen, but maybe more thoughtfully. No knee-jerk reactions here. And Mecky's thoughts on Tsunoda? He says that Red Bull always wants more from their drivers. He's not letting Tsunoda off the hook just because he worked with him in 2024 and really pushed for his promotion for 2025. Lawrence says that what he showed so far is good, but not good enough just yet. So when you couple that with what Marko's been saying, it seems that everyone within that team has been given a few more weeks to state their case. All of them, not just Yuki. French pundits have been saying that Isaac just needs to get his head down and finish the season cleanly, because after his Zandvoort third place, Isaac's time has been a little bit more bumpy. It's mostly been P11s, 1 point, and then a 16th in Austin being a really big downer. And again, I'm not saying that Isaac's in danger of losing his seat. No. It's about whether or not he'll get the call up to be promoted to Red Bull, or remain at Racing Bulls for one more year, and then maybe make the promotion, whatever happens. And Tsunoda himself, let's not forget, has been part of the campaign of relying on more analog information to define what happens with the car in terms of setup and strategy alongside Max Verstappen. It's not been a one-man band situation. Max and Yuki have worked together to help Red Bull come up with a plan that has ultimately resulted in the success that we have seen from Verstappen since the Dutch Grand Prix. Both drivers are being pumped for information, and we hear that straight from Red Bull's mouth. So could that analog strategy really help out all the drivers? Potentially. But like with Max saying that the team needs to be absolutely perfect if he hopes to win his 5th world title in a row, so too does that apply to Lawson, Hadjar and Tsunoda. They need to have really good weekends in relation to where they stand in the championship and their experience. It could mean that their hopes of being promoted or remaining where they are or being ousted could easily change. It might mean the driver meeting might be moved forward. And that meeting, whatever happens, will be the beginning of the Christian Horner era of Red Bull being completely changed. It will be no longer the team that he built. Changes will have been made. And a change I would like you to make is to maybe change your mind in clicking onto that video you were thinking about, and maybe this video, because I do think you will really like it. I'll see you over there.